I woke up at 3:15 in the morning to the sharp smell of gasoline, thick chemical, unmistakable, and when I grabbed my phone to check the security feed, I saw her. Karen Williams, the HOA president who had spent weeks trying to dismantle my veterinary practice. She was walking around my clinic in the dark, pouring a perfect ring of fuel around the surgical building where 6 recovering horses were sleeping. And when she pulled a match from her pocket and lifted her hand as if she was about to burn everything I'd built to the ground, I realized this wasn't a neighbor dispute anymore. This was pure, deliberate, calculated destruction. I should back up because none of this insanity started with gasoline. It started the day I moved onto my 25-acre ranch, a place I chose specifically because it wasn't part of any HOA. I'd been a large animal veterinarian for 15 years, and all I wanted was a place where I could work without someone lecturing me about mailbox heights or grass length. I bought that land for the quiet, the space, the freedom, and the ability to treat animals without anyone breathing down my neck. But apparently, HOA presidents don't respect fences or boundaries or the law. Because on my very first morning at the ranch, as I was unloading a new ultrasound machine from my truck, Karen came blasting up my gravel driveway in her white Lexus, like she owned the county. Her perfectly ironed polo shirt matched her perfectly laminated clipboard, the kind of clipboard that screams, "I make everything your problem." She marched right up to me, planted herself between me and my equipment, and shrilled, "You can't operate a business here. This violates our community guidelines." I told her calmly, too calmly in hindsight, that I wasn't part of her community. My land wasn't in her HOA. I'd verified it 1,000 times, but she just flipped through her papers, squinting like she had X-ray vision. "This entire area falls under Riverside Estates," she insisted. "You need approval." Then she made her first major mistake. She stepped directly in front of my truck, my emergency truck, when I needed to respond to a colic call. A horse's life was on the line, and she blocked me like she was guarding a VIP entrance. I had to raise my voice, something I very rarely do with humans, but she finally moved. Not before pulling out her phone and threatening to report every violation she could imagine. When I got home from saving that mare, there was a bright orange notice nailed to my gate, 72 hours to shut down my illegal commercial activity. Illegal. On my own land. I laughed at first. Then I realized she wasn't joking. Over the next few days, the harassment escalated with surgical precision. At 6 a.m., environmental health inspectors showed up something about improper waste disposal. At 10, zoning claimed I was operating a commercial facility in a residential zone. By noon, building and safety arrived to accuse me of unauthorized construction. 3 different departments in 6 hours, all anonymous complaints. But here's the thing. Veterinarians document everything, and every inspector walked away impressed, even apologetic. Still, Karen's message was clear. She was going to bury me in complaints until something stuck. That night I sat at my kitchen table staring at the old county maps I dug up from storage. My grandfather's ranch used to be 300 acres long before Riverside Estates existed. I traced the boundary lines with my finger, and that's when I realized something bigger than Karen, bigger than the HOA. The only road leading to their entire development, the road Karen drove on every single day, was on my land. Fully. Completely. And the temporary easement that once allowed HOA access had expired 3 years earlier. They had been trespassing without legal access for years. I remember leaning back in my chair, letting that information sink in. For the first time since Karen arrived, screaming about community codes, I had leverage. Real leverage. But before I could even think about using it, Karen escalated again. One morning I found 6 vehicles strategically parked across my driveway, blocking a shipment of critical antibiotics I needed for post-surgical horses. When I called the sheriff, he was furious. "This is obstruction of emergency medical service," he said. "This is a felony." Felony. And yet Karen showed up mid-investigation wearing khakis so stiff I swear they crackled in the wind, launching into a speech about protecting community values. I tried to focus on suturing a horse's leg injury while she shouted about property values. The moment she stepped into my barn uninvited, I knew everything was going to spiral. And it did. The HOA held a massive community meeting. Karen had a whole PowerPoint slideshow accusing me of turning my ranch into some kind of industrial animal factory. Photos of my vet truck, photos of my barn, photos of the security cameras I used because of her. I stood up in that room of 47 residents and said one sentence that changed the tone completely. May I see the permanent easement agreement that grants you road access to my land? Silence. Confusion. An elderly resident whispered that she'd never seen such a document. Another said she remembered it being temporary during construction. Karen's face went pale, the first crack in the mask. But even cracks can be dangerous, because desperation was fueling her now, and desperate people make choices that don't make sense. Like when she barged into my surgical suite during a full open abdomen operation. It was dawn. I'd been operating for hours on an Arabian mare with a twisted intestine. My hands were literally inside this animal, saving her life. And then I heard yelling. Angry yelling. Karen yelling. She stormed into the sterile field, into the room with no mask, no gloves, no understanding of how catastrophic an infection could be. She grabbed at my tools, she knocked over a stool, she even reached for an IV line. I couldn't even turn my head. I had to keep my hands inside the horse, focused, steady. Jennifer, my tech, called 911 and physically shielded the animal from Karen. Residents recorded the entire thing on their phones. The deputies arrived and had to restrain her while she kicked and screamed about illegal animal surgeries. That was the first time she was arrested. People thought that would be the end of it. But the worst villains don't stop at the first consequence or the second or the 10th. A few days later, the DEA showed up because Karen had filed a complaint saying I was distributing controlled substances illegally. I cooperated like I always do. They cleared me entirely. But while they were finishing their paperwork, I got another emergency, a barn fire 12 miles away with horses trapped inside. I raced to my truck and found Karen again. This time she had formed a human chain across my driveway. "You're not going anywhere," she screamed. "This ends today." I showed her the live video feed of the fire. Flames, smoke, horses panicking. You could hear their cries. She said it was staged. The fire chief yelled through my phone, "Doc, we need you now." Some residents began stepping aside, realizing this wasn't a game. But Karen grabbed one woman's arm and screamed at everyone that I was manipulating them. Deputies arrived. Karen grabbed a baseball bat. She swung it. She threatened federal agents. She crossed more legal lines in 10 minutes than most criminals do in a year. She was arrested again. And because her blockade delayed me, one beautiful quarter horse named Samson died from smoke inhalation. I drove home that night with Samson's loss sitting on my chest like a weight I couldn't lift. And that's the moment I truly broke. I sat in my truck in the dark, staring at my barn, wondering if I should just quit, shut it all down, move away. I wondered if maybe, just maybe, my presence here really had triggered something terrible for everyone. What if I was the problem? What if standing my ground was hurting more lives than helping? But then my phone buzzed. A simple message from a client. "Thank you for saving Daisy." And something inside me steadied. Horses didn't choose this fight. Patients didn't choose this fight. I did. And I wasn't about to abandon them. I kept going. Then came the night everything exploded. Literally. My smoke alarm blared at 3:15 a.m., and that gasoline smell hit me like a fist. I opened the security feed and watched Karen calmly walking around my clinic with a gas can. She'd poured accelerant along the foundation near gas lines, near my drug storage, near the recovery stalls where 6 horses were sleeping. I raced outside screaming for her to stop. She turned, lit a match, and said, "If I can't stop you, I'll destroy everything you have." She dropped the flame. A ring of fire erupted so fast it felt supernatural. I triggered the sprinklers. I hauled terrified horses into the paddock one by one, hooves slipping, animals coughing, flames climbing the walls. Deputies arrived and arrested Karen for the third and final time, dragging her away as she laughed, actually laughed, while the building burned. By dawn, nothing was left of my surgical clinic except twisted metal and charred beams. Everything I'd worked for was ash. But I wasn't done. Before the smoke even cleared, I called my lawyer and said, "Close the road. Install a military-grade gate. Today." By noon, Riverside Estates was locked in. Only emergency vehicles had access. Residents panicked. They called begging for access. But I wasn't negotiating. Not after arson. Not after a horse died because she blocked me. Not after she tried to kill 6 more. And the final blow landed when FBI agents searched Karen's house and found her manifesto pages of plans to poison water sources, sabotage veterinary drugs, and kill thousands of animals across 3 counties. They classified her actions as domestic terrorism. The HOA immediately turned on her. They removed her from every position, handed over financial records, proving she'd embezzled tens of thousands, and begged me to negotiate. I laid out my terms. $400,000 in restitution, a signed agreement guaranteeing the HOA would never claim authority over my land, and a public apology. They agreed within 24 hours. Karen Williams was sentenced to decades in federal prison on terrorism charges. And that's where my story ends, right at the moment the woman who tried to burn my life down finally faced real consequences. And if there's one thing I learned through all of this, it's this. Some boundaries aren't walls, they're warnings. And when someone refuses to respect them, you learn exactly who they really are.